Hey everybody, we are back. It's 6:30 on Sunday. Happy Father's Day to everybody. We are having a fantastic Cider Week Hudson Valley, and we're wrapping up our first weekend on this amazing, beautiful Father's Day here in the Hudson Valley. I'm so excited about this session. I have been longing for this for a long, long time. As soon as I knew it was coming, I was really excited about it, and this is going to be great. So this is all about a dinner date, and we're doing a chef and cider pairing. And so we are pairing the delicious Merchant's Daughter Dry Cider with the chef Dan Sabia of Wood Fired Foods is going to cook up some pork chops. So let's just go straight to it. It's amazing. There we go.
Happy Father's Day, everybody. We're here for Hudson Valley Cider Week. This is our first ever virtual cider week. I'm Dan O'Brien. I'm head cider maker with Merchant's Daughter Hard Cider. This is Dan Sabia. He's the mastermind behind Wood Fire Food. And today we're going to be making a dish. Dan's going to prepare it for us using an open fire here. And we're going to pair the Merchant's Daughter Hard Dry Cider with a thick cut pork chop here. And I'll let Dan tell you a little bit more about the dish. So why don't we get started?
Beautiful. So today we are preparing a Hemlock Hills center cut pork chop with charred leeks, smoked olives, all marinated in dried cider. The biggest question I always get asked as a chef is, what are the secrets to cooking? And it's a very simple answer. It's one word, and it's called salt. So everything that we season here is always very, very aggressive because we are cooking out on grills. We're cooking over fire, and about 50% of whatever you put onto the piece of meat or vegetable itself is going to fall through the grate. So very liberal on your seasoning. This is a special salt that our company makes here, which is our pork salt. Essentially has about 40 pounds of dehydrated pork skin in it, fennel pollen, Aleppo pepper, a little bit of smoked olives, and kosher salt, all mixed together. And we like to salt every single part of the pork itself. So we are just placing the pork chop on the bone side to let the heat naturally come up through the bone and use it as a conductor of heat. And we'll kind of let that slow roll as we start to prep the rest of the dish. All right, so our next step is going to be to prep our leeks. Our leeks are coming from Morningstar Farm, which is located up in the Hudson Valley. We are obviously at the start of our summer season right now. So we're still working with a lot of alliums, garlic, spring onions, garlic scapes, and things of that nature. So we're going to take this whole leek and we're going to break it up into two sections. The main section of this leek we are going to char very extensively over the open fire. And the top, we're going to kind of shave back a little bit and utilize this for our salsa. So here we have the tops and the bottoms, and we'll head over to the grill now. So we are going to kind of spread our leeks out over the top here. And then our large section down here, we're actually going to bury right down in the coals there.
You could just step back to the pork chop for a second. Is there any advantage to salting the meat earlier than right before you're going to cook it? Because sometimes you'll see a recipe where they say you should dry brine it or salt it and leave it in the fridge for a couple hours.
So for anything that is on the leaner side, your poultries, your pheasants, venisons, things like that, I always tend to do a dry brine ahead of time because it helps kind of essentially lock in all that excess moisture by preserving it in there. Anything that has a beautiful fat cap or a really thick density to it, I just season right before it goes on the grill. You don't need that extra barrier of protection. And that's kind of my variance between the two. Also, with a lot of cooking that I do, I never marinate proteins ahead of time. I think it's just kind of a waste of flavor. And if any of that marinade catches fire with the flame, it just ends up tasting like kerosene. Right. So a lot of the animals we're using are all coming from the Hudson Valley itself. So we really like to taste the animals for where they are. That's why we sort them out from every single location, because it has a great sort of like you know, you can taste the actual diet and the actual way that they're living through the meat itself. So why cover that up? That's why we use the product for what it is.
Sure. And it's the same thing with cider.
Yeah.
All of our apples come from the Hudson Valley.
There you go.
There's a particular terroir and there's a taste that they give.
There's that. All right, so as our leeks are charring and cooking, we're going to start making our salsa. So here we have just a classic lemon. We're going to use just the zest for now. That zest is going to bring a lot of freshness and acidity into our salsa because we're dealing with a very fatty pork chop. So we want something that's really nice and clean to cut through it. We are then going to take a few sprigs of parsley for some herbage and for some color. And we're just going to run our knives through them really quick. Parsley is like a very sort of neutral flavor. It keeps it very, not too sweet, not too savory, just right in the middle, just gives you that nice greenness. Chlorophyll, which is always a fun term to use when talking about herbs, it has a distinct flavor, so it's very sort of like grassy and just fresh. So I always tend to start most of my sauces with just straight parsley, and then depending on what we're cooking or the season that we're in, we'll add the herbs that are at the climax of flavor at that sort of time.
Now, I noticed you used only the zest. Is there a plan to use any of the juice?
So we'll use the juice at the end. I always add my acid to any of my herb sauces right before we serve it for two reasons. One, I don't want the herbs to turn brown. And two, that freshness of just that pure, sweet acid is exactly what you want right before it goes to the plate. You don't want it to warm up because it starts to lose its acidity. So we focus on that. So right now we just have a little bit of lemon zest, a little bit of parsley. We're going to add a little bit of Aleppo pepper, which is a North African pepper. It is very sweet and acidic, adds a really beautiful color. We're going to add a touch of fennel pollen. This comes directly from the fennel flower itself, not the seed. So it is actually insanely floral, which I think is something that's very reminiscent to your cider.
Oh, wow, yeah. It seems to be like a lighter kind of fennel flavor.
Yeah.
Not that heavy seed.
Not that heavy sort of, like that, just that classic like anise flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to take some of our smoked olives here, and we are going to quickly crush them, and then give them a quick chop and add them in. This is going to add some fattiness to the salsa, a little bit of brininess, and just a really clean smoke flavor over the top. So we're going to be doing a lot of layering of flavors. Obviously, we have things charring, we have things slow roasting all over the open fire, which in everybody's mind is, oh my God, it's barbecue, it's going to be so smoky. But the different style of how we cook this, from the different temperature usages to the height to the temperature across the board, we're actually able to layer our flavor into each dish, so it's not overpowering.
And for those people who can't find Aleppo pepper or fennel pollen, I would imagine you could substitute some similar.
You can use, you can use obviously hot or sweet pimentone. You could use red chili flake, or you can use something as simple as like a little bit of cayenne or a little bit of chili powder. Just you have to be adjusting to your amounts, obviously, because the heat is different across the board. All right, so we are going to add a little bit of olive oil, and it's just enough to kind of bring everything together. We want this to kind of be like a paste almost. And we'll set that off to the side and wait for our leeks to continue charring. All right, so our leek tops are officially charred. And then we could actually pull our leek from the bottom here. In the meantime, we will take our leek that has been buried in the coals, and we're going to wrap it in a towel so it starts to steam itself as we finish the rest of our salsa and then work on our glaze for the pork chop itself. So now we have our beautifully charred leek tops. We're just going to chiffonade these down, which just means slice super, super thin. So you're going to get nice sweetness from the allium, from the leek itself, and then nice bitterness from the charred part. And then this will just be a nice little contrast and flavor to the rest of our salsa. Are you a big salsa fan? Do you like using herbs?
I'm a huge salsa fan.
Beautiful.
And yes, especially when you make it.
There you go. There it is.
Well, you've always got something really interesting and creative to add into it. Like
Well,
I normally throw the leek tops away. So there you go.
So our main thing, and you'll see with a couple of ingredients we have coming up, our main thing was about, and because we are sourcing directly from every single farm within our area, and we aren't going to the big box stores, and we aren't going to the Baldors and everything else, it was about buying our product, but using every single aspect of it because every part of it is money.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's like not only are we trying to save our product, whatever it is, but it's forcing us to get creative. So, you know, we have a massive inventory of all of our homemade vinegars. We have preserves, we have pickles, ashes, salt mixes that are based off of all the scraps that everybody would normally throw away. We do our best to utilize every aspect of it. And it's all about telling the story of the individual product itself.
Tell me more about the ashes, because that's a first.
So the ash, you know, it's when you really go back into history and you think about it, and it's something as simple as like our olives. Olives were originally brined using ash. So
as a preservative.
As a preservative, right? So we are just kind of fulfilling that concept, but the ash itself is just a very bitter note. You think about like when you go to like barbecue spots and you go to the South or Kansas City or Texas and you get all the burnt ends. Like that is the most savory portion of it, the most crispy, the most crunchy, the most smoky.
That's the part everyone secretly wants.
That's part everybody says. So that is straight carbon there, and that's why we love it. It's that bitter flavor. So when you're dealing with super fresh ingredients, really, really high acid ingredients, that bitterness in the back of your tongue there allows like another level of flavor that you're like, this is not just a grilled pork chop. Like what else is going on here? So we just take the time to really like, you know, manipulate every part of what we're doing to make it the best that it can be. All right, so now time to start using the cider, right?
Yeah.
So here we have a bowl, and we are going to add 3 ingredients. This is a local honey that I caramelized to the point where it was almost burnt, and then deglaze it with our charred chili vinegar. We have a sofrito that is made up of slow roasted onions, slow roasted garlic, anchovies, and tomato paste, and about 27 different spices. And then lastly, for some acidity, we're going to add our dried cider mix to there. So that bubbles, that cleanness, that freshness is going to be a nice little acid break as we baste the outside of our pork chop with it.
Okay. So primarily the cider is, in this case, is functioning as an acid source.
Acid source, but also a flavor, so a freshness source.
Okay, great.
So we're utilizing probably equal parts across the board here. And this is going to be a very, very deep, rich flavor, which I think is awesome because what we're serving it with, the charred leeks, which are going to marinate in that same cider, this herb dressing is going to be very, very light and acidic and sort of free. And then lastly, I'm going to top it off with our dried cider here. Call that the 2-glug pour. It's patented. Patented. All right. So we're just going to give that a little mix and kind of create like a little bit of a slurry here.
Yeah.
So you can see as it starts to foam up, it reacts right away to all the cooked ingredients because it's causing the cider to oxidize right now, which is great because that gives us another little layer of just like bite, right? So we're going to head over to our pork chop here. And this pork chop has been slowly kind of tempering all the way through the center. And you can see on the bottom, you know, how we have that nice caramelization all the way through.
Right.
That's exactly what we're looking for.
So while we're here, let me ask you, or go ahead and glaze, and then I have a question for you. So I'm a little older than you, in case you haven't noticed.
It's okay.
And when I was growing up, we were always told you had to cook a pork chop to 160 degrees because of diseases that the pigs would get, like trichinosis, right?
Correct.
Now, my understanding is that has changed a lot in recent times. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, obviously. So dealing with trichinosis, which is a very terrifying thing, and even all the restaurants that I've ran for the past 10 or 12 years, that is always a common factor. Is everybody is always so concerned about how their pork is cooked. And we go through extensive training about talking to our servers, talking to the guest about like how the concept or the disease of trichinosis hasn't existed in over 50 years at this point because of the diets of the pigs. And the diet of the pig is another big thing. That's why I only use locally sourced pork itself, because at least I know the farmer that's doing it. I know the process of how they're fed, and I know the process of raising them and exactly what that looks like. We try to stay away from like the larger companies of the mass production, because who knows at the end of the day what is really going into your system, any of that. So I always prefer, and I always try to promote people to cook your pork to about 135 to about 140 degrees internally, which is about a medium when it comes to like steak talk. And it's all about resting. Like resting is really the biggest misconception when it comes to cooking large cuts, is because everyone's like, oh, well, it's cooked, it's done, let's just cut into it and eat it. But all that delicious flavor that's being stored on the inside is now being wasted because it just bleeds out through the bottom. So what we do is we cook it to about 135, 140. We let it chill out off to the side for about 10 minutes, and then we'll slice right into it. And what you'll see is the inside of the pork itself will be nice and rosy, like a rosé color, not a blood red color, but more of like, it'll look like a proper medium when it comes to a steak. And by the time it is, rested, you'll have a little bit of that hue still there, but the meat itself will be just really plump and juicy and delicious. So we're just going to let this kind of rotate back and forth, constantly like basting each side. And we'll check back on it in about 10 minutes.
Great.
All right, so after the hibernation of our leek, we are going to take him out, and we are going to peel back all of that beautiful carbon and relieve a super succulent and sweet center. Okay, so what we're going to do now is take our super cooked through leek, super tender, and we're going to cut it into like little coins. All right, and that coin is going to go right into this bowl here. We are going to add a squeeze of fresh lemon juice. We are going to add a splash of cider. I'm just going to add a little bit of effervescence to our leeks. A little bit of olive oil to help balance out that acidity. And this is essentially like an escabeche, which is a very classic like Spain dish, where it is a marination process through acidity. So all over Spain, you'll have leek escabeche, you'll have mussel escabeche, you'll have these dishes that are literally, think about like sushi, but they are cured essentially with high acid and high salt.
Right.
So it creates a really, really nice condiment over grilled meat. And then lastly, we're going to take a little spoonful of our salsa here for color. And we're going to drop that right in there. And then we're just going to give this a mix. And I'm not worried about them all staying together. I want this to kind of become like a really chunky condiment. And then we're going to add a little bit of salt for measure. And a little bit more of Aleppo pepper. And that is that. So we've been rotating the pork chop about 5 minutes on each side, back and forth. We want to get that crust on the outside, because that crust equals flavor. And every time we turn, we just give it another baste. And we will pull this off probably in the next 2 minutes, and then let that rest, and then we can start composing the rest of the dish.
So, and what would happen if you were not to let it rest? We were saying earlier that that's very important. So what are the consequences if you just take it off and dig right in?
Think about it as simple as the human body, right? So you go to the gym, right? And you do a full workout, and your muscles are all full of blood, and they're all tense from a lot of just like kinetic energy being pushed through you. If you were to just stop right away and just go sit still for a second, your body would go through this very weird period where you would start overheating and oversweating, because the momentum inside your body is still continuously moving, but as you as a physical person is sitting still. So it's the same concept with this. Heat is hitting this muscle group, and it's causing it to tense up really, really intensely, which is naturally going to cause the juice from the inside of the water to be pushed to the surface. Mm-hmm. If you cut that while that muscle is very, very tense, all of that juice will just pee out everywhere, and you'll literally lose every ounce of flavor. So the idea of resting it is about maturity. It's about regaining its flavor. It's about how to get the marination process of the flavor of the meat, the salt, the glaze, to all to kind of re-resin with itself, right? Kind of like the same process of why we age and mature your ciders, right?
Sure.
You want to talk a little bit more about these ciders and why we take the long process to make them the way they are?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I used to be a winemaker, so I came from the wine world, and I'm a bit of a wine snob. And then when Christine, my partner, proposed that we start a hard cider company together, I wasn't so much interested in making cider perhaps the way that it's been made recently a lot. I was more interested in making it more like a wine because I like the delicacy, the aromatic nature of wine, the depth. And so the way that we do our ciders is that we take culinary apples. Sorry, the smoke is getting me here. So we take a blend of culinary apples, things you may have heard of, Northern Spy, Wine Sap, Ida Red, just a few that we use. And we ferment them really slowly at a lower temperature because we don't want to blow off all those pretty aromatics with the heat. And very careful to not let any off flavors develop. So it's a very pure, clean process. And then we allow it to mature. We give it some time and we let it sit around because if you drink it right away, it just has this yeasty, like fresh bread character, which is nice, but not really what I want in the cider. So
the sugars haven't had a chance to mature yet. Yeah.
Yeah. So we give it some time to mature before we bottle it. And the other thing that I'm very particular about is acidity. So we've talked a lot about acid here. There's something called malolactic fermentation, which would happen if you were to just leave the apple cider unprotected. The malic acid in that apple would start to convert to lactic acid, which is a softer acid, and I don't want that. So I stop the malolactic process early on so that it never happens, and you're left with a lot brighter acidity in the cider. One of the reasons that it pairs great with food, and one of the reasons that it keeps you salivating and going for more. So I'm real big on the acid. So preserving aromatics, bright acid, two of the things that are really important in our ciders.
Love it. So, I mean, when we first started talking, almost a year ago at this point, we did this dinner in an orchard, and it was all about, like, combining the Hudson Valley with cider in the area. And we had this conversation that I'm very anti-sweet. So it was all about like how to find a cider that actually worked. And in my mind and my family's heritage, we come from Spain and Italy. The ciders that we usually drink are very high in acid, very dry.
Sure, yeah,
that's what I'm used to. So when we found out about each other, it was very exciting because there wasn't a producer in the area that was producing ciders in the way that you are in the wine sense. So writing a menu, literally it took us about 30 seconds to write it out, and we were able to kind of contrast all the way through, and that's why that relationship has first started, and I think that's why that relationship will always be there. Because it's just the understanding of how important acid is to an entire meal, to the longevity of a meal. Because food and wine and anything else can be exhausting. Your palate can get exhausted by things, but if you're constantly cutting it with acid, it's like refreshing it every single time.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right, we are going to remove this, and we're going to let that chill out for a little bit.
All right.
Wonderful. All right, so we are going to get to the plating process of this dish because we have finally gone through the full journey of leveling out all our flavors. We're going to add some crushed smoked olives to this, just for a little bit of meatiness and some brininess. And it's just a simple tear in half. I mean, this is backyard cooking, so we call it rustic, but it's refined at the same time. Just a little bit more olive oil. Olive oil is another very important aspect of the thing, right? Because we're so used to going to the store, we're buying canola oils, we're buying blended oils, we're buying oils that have been filtered 5, 6, 7, 12 times. Right. And it doesn't taste like anything anymore, right?
Well, they've been bleached. They've been
exactly. So I am very, very aware of the olives that I use. Obviously the olives I use for this, but the olive oil we use as well. So I always like to use a first press olive oil, organic first press olive oil. This tastes more like green tomatoes than it does olives. So it's very bright, it's very acidic, and sometimes I completely replace this with acid. So I'll just put this on a dish and call it a day. I don't need to add anything else because this has the brightness to it. And that's why anytime I'm making a sauce to finish with, I always start with that. All right, so we have our leeks and smoked olives. We have our salsa verde. And then we have our cider and honey glazed pork chop. Cheers.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
So this has been quite an adventure.
For sure. For sure.
And now we finally
Get to taste all the hard work,
get to
right?
taste.
It takes what, a
Yeah.
full year for you to taste your product? This only took like an hour,
It
but
takes about 6 months, but
it's all the same.
yeah.
All right.
well, it took a little longer for the pig to grow himself up. So
That's true. He did good though.
all right,
He tried his hardest. All right.
all right. So pork and apples, right?
Makes a lot of sense to me.
It's a
Since
perfect
day one.
It's a perfect match.
Is that the Brady Bunch that taught us that?
It was pork chops and applesauce.
Yep.
But there's a real that's a big piece. If I take that, I'm gonna look silly eating it.
I'll grab another one though.
So how is it? Make sure to get some of that cider in there.
That's good. That's real good. I think you know, it's not like a lot of these pairings you go to, it's always about being like a far stretch, where this is just like kind of hand in hand.
I get all of those green flavors from the olives, from the parsley.
Yeah, very clean. Even the fat isn't like too heavy.
No, not at all, actually. And we were putting quite a bit of olive oil in there. Wow. So you know what always strikes me as when a food and a drink match up perfectly is that you can't tell the difference between where the food ends and where the drink begins. So you know you're chewing, you put a little in your mouth, and there's like you don't notice a line between the two.
Correct.
It's just this transition, and it also brings the pork out. So like I taste more pork after I put a little cider in my mouth.
Yep.
And that acidity, the acidity of the apples and the cider just cuts right through that fat.
And then fun fact is that you know, apples are a big part of the pig's diet on Hemlock Hill Farm.
Oh really?
So it all comes full circle, you know. But just as we've been talking about this entire time, acid, right? So you talk about the sugar content from apple A all the way to apple Z. You have your Macintosh and your Golden Delicious in comparison to your Granny Smiths and all of that. So you have high sugar content. You have really like bitter and bitey apples.
Right. So with Northern Spy in this case would be the apple with all the acidity, with a lot of that bite. Jonagold, an apple that we use that's really high in sugar, just a really lush and tasty apple, and it's just fantastic, man. Really. And so before we end, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the importance of the smoke.
Yep.
Because I know Wood Fire Food is your company, and the whole premise behind it is that you cook everything over fire. And I wanted to talk to you about the smoke, because you said something really interesting to me once, was the importance of the smoke as an ingredient, as an element in the food. So just
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
And we'll start really simple. I'll ask you a very simple question right now. You've watched every process of cooking this, right?
Yep.
How smoky is your food right now?
It's not that smoky at all.
Right. So it's understanding that the quality of the ingredients are just as important over the wood and the style of how you cook it. So for me, smoke and fire is a very quintessential ingredient in what I cook. The same way that a spice is the same way that I operate around meat. I'm sorry, the way I operate around smoke. For me, smoke is a transfer of essentially fat. Smoke can coat your entire mouth. Smoke can overcompensate and exhaust your palate very quickly. So if you pay attention to what ingredients you're doing and how they're being cooked, from the olives that we use that already had a little bit of smoke into it, to how we slow roasted the pork high above the fire instead of directly above it, to how we literally buried the leeks inside the coals but then peeled off the entire outside of it, right? So we just used the heat from the coals instead of the actual flavor. So we're able to separate it into what is a flavor profile and what is just a source of cooking concept. So simple food is the most beautiful food, right? So any dish that you can cook with only using 3 ingredients and one of those ingredients is what you're cooking over, I think you'll have very, very clean flavors constantly. And when you pair it with really, really acidic ingredients, you're able to have a dish that we could literally sit here and pick at this all day and never get tired of.
That's my plan.
That is the plan, right? I think that's the biggest separation between like barbecue and this style of food. So this is more about indirect heat and understanding the concept of what it does, and where barbecue is very focused on getting every ounce of smoke into that ingredient.
Yeah.
But,
I love that. I love the subtle way that the smoke just supports everything.
Yep.
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So happy Father's Day to everybody out
sure.
there. And hope you guys enjoy the rest of the Hudson Valley Cider Week events.
And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Thanks.
All right. That was amazing and looks delicious. And if you know me that there's not a lot that I don't try or taste that I think, wow, I wish this just had a little bit more of a smoky flavor. So I think I may have found a new favorite individual in Chef Dan. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that. And I can't tell you how much I love the Merchant's Daughter cider. Just a fantastic brand, a fantastic cider, and bringing the two together is phenomenal. So thank you so much, Dan and Chef Dan Sabia. That was fantastic. So we are going to be posting these videos on our YouTube channel at New York Cider Association TV. So if you want to go to ciderweekhv.com on our events page, all those ingredients are listed, all that information's there. You can go and check out the ingredients and then go back over to our YouTube page, New York Cider Association TV, and that video will be there and you can watch again and cook along with them and enjoy the taste of it. So this has been an amazing first weekend for our first ever virtual Cider Week Hudson Valley. We've had some incredible orchard tours and tastings and dinner dates, some pairings, and all of these videos are on our YouTube channel, so check it out. And we have a week ahead, so there's a lot more to come. Tomorrow, we're going to start our happy hour cocktail recipes, where I'll be meeting with several different participating cideries. We'll be making cocktails and talking about their cider. We have more pairings to come. We have some really exciting conversations we're going to have. Tomorrow night, I would invite you to join us for our cider conversation around race and cider, which is incredibly poignant and important at this time. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be tomorrow night. Check out our events page to find the exact time listing. And then actually we have some fun events. Merchant's Daughter is actually gonna do next Saturday at 2 o'clock, a sip and symmetry drawing session where you'll be drawing and sipping cider, which is pretty fantastic. We also have a sip and yoga session coming up with Penning's Farm. So there's just a whole week of really amazing events still ahead. So stay tuned to us on our YouTube channel at New York Cider Association TV. Check out our website at ciderweekhv.com for all the event listings and where to buy the cider before the events. And then finally, if you are able, this whole week of programming is free, but we would really be able to use the support in any way that's possible. So if you're able to donate, go to our website, click on the link and do what you can. And know that 20% of the proceeds are actually going to go to the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, which we've tied into because they're really focused on issues of COVID-19 relief for restaurant workers and also issues around social justice. So we're working with them on that and very pleased to be supporting that. And the restaurant workers obviously are incredibly important and near and dear to our hearts here in the cider industry. So please do what you can. All right, I think that we are going to wrap up for the weekend. I can't believe we made it through. It's been an interesting experience and quite an adventure, and I'm looking forward to so much more. Before we go, I just want to wish a happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Thank you so much, and we'll come back tomorrow. Visit us tomorrow. All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks. Cheers. Oh.